Hello and welcome to the land down under, where the beer flows free and men chunder. Your hosts Frank and Gaz will seek to wrestle the latest technology, including AI voice actors such as myself. Their goal? To take a cross-disciplinary deep dive into the Beatles' 1964 Australasian tour.
Yeah, Australia. Think of satiric economy with 4 musicians going through it. Hello, Cover, how's Wagga Wagga?
I did but see her passing by, and yet I love her till I die.
Well, welcome back to another episode of They Came to a Land Down Under, our deep dive into the Beatles' tour of Australasia 1964. And today you're going to be getting a lot of local content. In fact, I'm broadcasting here in the middle of the bush capital, while Frank's up in Sin City. But here in the bush capital, you'll get a taste of the sounds that the Beatles unfortunately didn't get to experience that much of. But nonetheless, still made sure that on this tour, they got up and close with our native flora and fauna.
Wednesday, 17th June. Probable free day, Melbourne. Efforts being made to arrange for them to go to Colin Mackenzie Sanctuary. John Lennon, allegedly, says he wants to pull a kangaroo's tail.
Beatle mugs with pictures of the boys. Now, that's the closest that Paul has got to a kangaroo, and it's his ambition to see a kangaroo whilst in the...
Seen wrapping his arms around Taylor as they walked around. The couple even hand-fed kangaroos and met koalas.
Just watching closely coverage of the Swift tour, and as I said, tracking the movements of herself and her boyfriend, I did notice rather interestingly that she seemed to make 2 visits to Taronga Zoo. So suggesting she was quite taken in by some of our beautiful furry animals.
Beatles. Fact check.
In breaking news, and in a sign that there's always going to be someone out there who wants to correct the smallest errors, we need to inform you that Taylor Swift did not visit Taronga Zoo twice. Instead, she visited Sydney Zoo near Blacktown. We wish to correct the record for those creating podcasts of this famous tour in the year 2084.
And you know what? Looking through the research for this podcast and the stable of stars that Betty Stewart, who was on Beatles promotion, was responsible for, there seemed to be a theme emerging here of stars, whether it's them desiring it or whether it's our suggestion, being photographed with our native flora and fauna. And you know what? This may well be an unrecognised form of Australia's soft power.
Well, that's a very interesting thought.
And if I can give you another piece of telling evidence. So our National Library just keeps on giving. And today I located a book called Life with Guji by John McCallum, who turns out to be one of the critical players in one of Australia's most successful television series.
I'll tell you something funny. When our then Prime Minister Harold Holt, went to America for the first time and met President Johnson, the first thing the President said to him was, "How's Skippy?"
I didn't know that. That's incredible. That really is incredible. But for those that have never heard of Skippy, do you want to explain how it was a TV show produced in the mid-60s, which achieved international success, being watched by 300 million people, apparently, as far as I can tell. So this is the 1960s, and by then, the kangaroo had become an iconic emblem of Australia, hadn't it? So much so that the American president's first question of an Australian Prime Minister is, "How's Skippy?"
What's that, Skip? You want the scalpel? What's that, Skip? Gee.
Now, John Lennon said he wanted to pull a kangaroo's tail. Paul McCartney apparently wanted to meet a kangaroo on the tour. Mal Evans, their roadie, the big softy, photograph of him cuddling up to a koala. But for the Beatles, unfortunately, the animals had to be transported to them. And I asked myself the obvious question, did they meet Skippy? Well, by 1964, unfortunately, Skippy wasn't a thing yet, right?
What I find fascinating is that visiting celebrities now are typically introduced to cute, unique Australian animals, aren't they? Be it kangaroos, koalas. Who can forget about visiting celebrity being urinated over by a cuddly koala?
Two stars from the Anglo-Irish boy band One Direction fear they may have contracted the sexually transmitted disease chlamydia after being peed on by a koala in Australia, according to The Sun. The newspaper reports that 18-year-old singers Liam Payne and Harry Styles visited a Brisbane sanctuary and cuddled with a koala named Cat who peed on them.
You're right. The Beatles, with their fascination, right through to Taylor Swift, today going to see, and apparently there was a strong interest in the kangaroos, always is. You know, it's a sort of a display of our uniqueness and national pride, isn't it? Linking to your notion of soft power, it does have universal appeal.
Happy birthday, Paul. On behalf of 2SM, our listeners and all the good guys, we present you with this kangaroo to take back and remember your trip to Australia.
Thank you very much. No, really lovely. A better kangaroo I've yet to see. And this card is truly wonderful.
When Barbara, Sinatra's fourth wife, wanted to see a kangaroo, she didn't go to the zoo. The kangaroo came to the hotel.
The Modern Family cast got up close and personal with some Aussie critters when they came down under earlier this year to film their special Australia episode.
Oprah met a koala when she famously brought her show Down Under in 2011.
Last week, singing sensation Justin Timberlake took some time out from his busy Aussie tour to cuddle a koala.
The Keeping Up with the Kardashian star snuggled up with a super cute koala and even managed to pose for a glamorous selfie with the warm and fuzzy creature.
George got to meet a bilby named after him. Prince George was then presented with a stuffed toy bilby but threw it on the ground moments later.
Brazilian beauty and Victoria's Secret model Alessandra Ambrosio was the latest celebrity to visit Taronga Zoo feeding a kangaroo while she was in Sydney this week.
Former Spice Girl Mel C paid a visit to Australia Zoo last year, along with her fellow cast members including Tim Minchin, when they toured with the musical production of Jesus Christ Superstar.
Right, a kangaroo is immediately recognised. A koala, you know, people all around the world immediately want to touch it and cuddle it. So it's a very powerful symbol. And I'm just thinking out aloud, I think we've actually mythologised the kangaroo, right? We've created a sort of an Australian archetype, right? It represents something unique about us, so it sits on our currency. It's ingrained in the vernacular, you know, the flying kangaroo. Our airline. And what does it look like? It's got gloves, mate, and it's punching above its weight, right?
It beat Goliath on the waters of Newfoundland.
Down under. Yes,
Down
exactly.
Under. Let's go back to the America's Cup.
You know, the punching kangaroo. You know, so external projection doesn't get better than a kangaroo. Our unique flora and fauna. So that show Skippy, and I don't know if you watched it, but certainly when I was a kid, I absolutely loved Skippy. I would wait for it to come on, and what did I like about it? I was thinking about this the other day. Well, the great outdoors. It sort of, you know, had the bush and the big sky, and it was filmed in Ringo National Chase, which is, you know, a sort of an archetypal Australian national park. It represented adventure. There was always something happening, you know, some criminal getting up to something. So it was adventurous. It was cute and friendly. And look, for a pre-pubic 10-year-old, the teenage girl, it was quite fascinating and enthralling. So it was a huge thing, and it did extraordinarily well overseas. And in fact, I believe, I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure it's still being shown in some countries around the world.
What's that, Skip? Yeah, I reckon I could use a cold one too.
And now some words from our 1964 sponsors.
Oh, no doubt it'd be on reruns and DVDs and so on. But there was a deeper messages in it too. Someone closely associated with the program describes some of the enduring values and themes, and he talks about the dominance of mateship over authority. So, there's this episode where they catch some thieves, and I think Sonny's saying to his dad, played by Ed Devereaux, even for thieves, like, there's nothing like mateship. There's nothing like a good mate. They need a good mate. There's there's deeper layers to this that maybe you and I haven't thought through yet.
And again, it's. I'm thinking out aloud here, but one thing now that this is a long, long time ago that I watched Skippy, but one thing that used to strike me as a young lad was that this guy didn't have a mother. His father was a widower, and so there was always an element of a slight element of pathos, right, about that. Once it was unspoken,
his company and his solace, yeah.
His company, his solace. So there are look. It bears further investigation. The psychodynamics of it.
Well, let me talk about it too, because I'm really keen to talk about this topic. Just a little bit more on the Beatles part of it, right? Because they were trying to arrange a meeting with Kangaroo, and it turns out that the first animal encounter was a docile blue kangaroo, coincidentally named Cynthia, which happened to be the name of John Lennon's wife. She was supposed to meet them on a plane, but at the last minute, the fans broke through security and started running towards the aircraft, so they decided it wasn't going to be safe. I'm giving you the granularity of this experience here, Frank.
No matter what the teenager thinks of the Beatles, the psychologists must find their own explanations. And Bob Rogers spoke to this psychologist in London.
I think one of the big reasons is that initially that the sound is certainly a very appealing one, but this is only half the message. I think the message why it's so appealing to these young people now is a status symbol, the same way as having a car is a status symbol to a more adult population. With this population, the status symbol is to rave about a particular sound. And if you don't do this, you're really not with this group at all, and they don't want to know about you.
And it is a mystery by what presence they are swayed like great flocks of birds that suddenly wheel as one, to let fly together one screaming squeal that makes the thousands one.
In Brisbane, though, they got their wish when at Lennon's Hotel they met a 5-foot kangaroo named Lady
My
Red.
My goodness. At the hotel.
Right. At the hotel. They had to bring the kangaroo to the hotel. At the same time as a ring-tailed possum named Pierce. Who disappeared up Ringo's sleeve.
Up his sleeve?
Later to emerge hanging from one of his fingers.
Right.
There was a koala named Claude and the dingo puppy, towards which reportedly Ringo felt quite fatherly enough for the handler, David Flea, to ask him to christen him Ringo.
So hang on. That's incredible. So there was a dingo out there called Ringo the Dingo.
Don't ill treat me, pet dingo, Ringo.
Yes,
treat me, pet dingo.
Absolutely. It's better than that. Let me keep going here. Pretty simple Google search of this important aspect of Beatles. Doubt that there is a book out there on the Beatles and Australian native flora and fauna.
Well, I mean, we haven't unearthed it yet.
We haven't. I've unearthed Sex and the 400 entries of the Beatles. I mean, there's special books are coming out.
Okay.
But not Sex and the Beatles is out, but not yet. So through Google searching, I think I've uncovered something rather.
Hang on, is that Ringo the Dingo in the background?
It's one of my pet dingoes out here. That's not easy to edit out, but it's very curious. I don't know if this is a phenomenon elsewhere in the world. I'm interested in other listeners, if there are any out there, to perhaps write into us on this. But there seemed to become a thing here of naming wildlife Ringo, right? Naming our wildlife after Ringo. So we've got Ringo the Dingo, right? And it just didn't take much, just a bit of basic internet searching, but up came this list of references.
There is nothing more Ringo, our bare-nosed wombat, loves more than carrots. The boisterous boy was born in August 2013. He was found as an orphaned baby and adopted by Wildlife Sydney Zoo. Ringo can be found raising havoc at Wallaby Cliffs, though he is often out and about in the zoo meeting his adoring fans.
You can help people like Roz live the life they choose by helping to train more seeing eye dogs. Before she was matched with Ringo, Roz's life was restricted and frustrating. With 2 degenerative eye conditions, she said she felt she was living in a grey world. She'd stopped going out. Now with Ringo by her side, she's not only going out, but she's going on far-flung adventures. They go hiking together in national parks. They've visited the Northern Territory, explored Uluru and travelled by train all the way to Darwin.
Ringo the orphaned ringtail possum was found all alone on the road. After a health check from the Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital team, Ringo was given the all clear and transferred to an experienced wildlife carer to raise him until he is ready for life on his own.
Ringo is a yellow-bellied sheath-tail bat who came into care in November 2020 after being rescued off a barbed wire fence. She has lost too much membrane and bone from one wing to fly. On that day, over 20 little red flying foxes were found dead on the same fence. Ringo feeds herself mealworms with a nutrient additive and has a bat box with winter heating.
This handsome guy is named Ringo Starr. He is approximately 1 year old and is the best guy ever, and he is a great size weighing in at 37 pounds and not going to get much bigger. He will make a great running or walking partner and will excel in obedience training. After some good exercise, he will want to just cuddle up with you. He gets along good with other dogs, but because of his loyalty to his owner, he can have some jealousy issues, so a home without other dogs may be best. Ring is neutered, current on shots and microchipped.
There's a form of cockatoo which is nicknamed the Ringo Starr of the bird world. It's a palm cockatoo. It's flamboyant, smoky grey parrot with bright red cheeks and dramatic crest feathers. Dubbed the, quote, Ringo Starr of the bird world due to its drumming abilities, crafting its own musical instrument out of bark. Okay, now you're wondering about the source of this. Professor Robert Heinsohn, I believe, from Australian National University, right here in my very town. He's been studying the bird since the 90s. He says, quote, they have a very good sense of rhythm and different styles of drumming signatures. So,
Will, my question is, mate, is it left-handed?
Well, to be the true Ringo drumming style, it would have to be a left-handed bird drumming on a right-handed setup.
Yeah.
The neat grey figures, with their medieval hair, strum and shout to themselves in the focused glare. Perhaps they cannot even hear themselves, for they twitch like wound-up dolls on remote shelves while the audience is performing.
The bright spot on your dial.
Lenny's on the live wire line.
930, the greater 3 you said.
Beatle headquarters in the Melbourne market.
The greater 3 you said. The station with the nicest listeners.
So listeners, I was really fortunate to discover that here in my hometown of Canberra, the national capital of Australia, is Professor Robert Heinsohn of the Australian National University. And just turns out that he happens to be the leading expert in Australia, and if not the world, on this endangered Ringo Starr of the bird world, the Palm Cockatoo. I was very fortunate to be able to sit down and have a chat with him about that.
They're the largest cockatoo in the world, largest species, and they have this incredible erect crest, a really tall crest that they erect, and they have these red cheek patches which they blush when they're excited. Including when they're sexually excited.
Okay.
And there was this big male, and he was calling. They have a whole variety of calls. They're really, really loud and magnificent calls. But also, he had a stick in his foot, and he was tapping on the branch.
Wow. And
I stood about 30 metres away with him in the binoculars. He saw me. He was looking right back at me, and I just watched him doing his display. It's an unusual form of tool use because normally when animals make tools, they do it in the context of finding food. Palm cockatoos were unusual and were turned out pretty much unique in the animal world because they were using their tool as part of their sexual display. So the males do it to impress the females. And they've just learned how to do this to enhance their sexual display, which includes all those weird and wonderful calls. It includes the crest erecting, the cheek blushing, little bobbing songs and dances, but also the manufacture of the tool, which is a very ostentatious process. He does that in front of the female, snips off a branch, cuts it down to size, makes it just perfect. Then he goes back to the hollow and he starts tapping. But it's very sophisticated because he does it rhythmically. A good display that impresses females has to be rhythmic. It's a regular beat. It averages about 120 beats per minute, which is roughly in the range of, a lot of rock music. One fascinating thing is that each male has his own style, his own drumming signature. It's always a steady rhythm, but some like to beat fast, some prefer to beat much more slowly, and other ones throw in little flourishes.
Is it like a fill in a drum?
Yeah,
where you...
that's exactly.
Right. Wow.
And we worked out that they're all different. So even though they're all rhythmic, they have their own style, and we're pretty sure that the males could tell each other apart just from their drumming signature. They are endangered, and it's because of their slow reproductive rates. So they're naturally slow. Like you said, they have their one egg every 2 years, and that one egg has a very high chance of being predated. So, they only produce a surviving chick about once every 10 years on average. It's a really slow rate. We know they live for a long time, so they can,
go more chance to reproduce.
That's right. Yeah. So, they're living at least 60 years, but we believe many of them in the wild are living to be over 100.
Wow.
Which sort of compensates for the slowness.
Yeah, okay.
But something has gone wrong with that slowness. We think that rate of predation on the eggs is higher than it should be, and that they should be more productive than they are. So
climatic or...
Climatic, and it's an upset to the ecosystem up there that we don't understand, but cane toads came in and that changed the predator balance so that some things became less common, some things became more common. Whatever became more common, we believe, eats the eggs and the chicks.
Professor, are you responsible for the nickname Ringo Starr?
I am, yes.
You are, okay.
My popular music stage came a bit after the Beatles, but they were very much around in the 70s when I was getting tuned in. So Beatles have always been very high on the radar for me, and I absolutely love some of their songs.
Okay.
So when I had to think of a famous drummer, Ringo Starr immediately came to mind.
Okay. So
there weren't many other contenders.
Yes. And this is interesting because I've tried to look at some of the parallels between Ringo and the cockatoo, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Ringo's credited his own drumsticks.
No, interesting.
But he's a survivor, though.
Mm.
And when the odds are quite stacked against him in terms of his life and illness and so on. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But he's actually plays on a right-handed kit, right?
Right.
But he's left-handed.
Ah.
So there's something about the technique of having to move his left hand on the fills.
That's interesting.
And then I thought, I've seen pictures of these guys, and some of them seem left-handed.
They're all left-handed.
Right.
Yes.
So
waiting to find a right-handed one.
A strange parallel.
That is an interesting parallel, and not one that I was aware of.
And now for a few words from our 1964 sponsors.
Throughout the Commonwealth of Australia, in the widely separated plants of General Motors Holdens, men and women are busily engaged producing the company's wide range of products. This is the body assembly and hardware plant at Elizabeth, South Australia's new industrial town. A planned town, named after Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, who's to visit the town and the GMH plant.
Now, just going back to a little bit of historiography of Skippy, I immediately thought, well, for other listeners out there, Lassie and Flipper.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking, well, here's the Australia's answer to it. And I didn't know if it was such a direct consideration or not. But according to the literature that I've dug up, it was in response to a London agent's suggestion and inspired by the success of Flipper, which was 64 to 67, and Lassie 54 to 74. The team here searched for a unique Australian subject with the potential to sell overseas.
Just a personal observation. I mentioned earlier that I was a huge fan of Skippy, right? But I have to also note that I was an enormous fan of Flipper, right? Flipper Flipper was instrumental in my understanding of water culture and Americans out there in California, Florida, wherever it was. I absolutely adored that. Lassie, maybe Lassie. It was a similar thing, but Flipper was incredible. His intelligence. I mean, Flipper was a genius, right? As was Skippy. Skippy was a genius.
Well, I would like to posit that Skippy was capable of far more genius behaviour than those other creatures.
No, look, I agree. There's no doubt about that.
For an animal that's apparently harder to train than a dog, he did incredible things. He actually, got to say there's not just one Skippy, by the way. Sorry to break this to you, Frank. There are multiple.
No, stop.
Did you know?
Do not break my heart. Do not break my heart, Gareth.
Well, there's one main one who was very pretty, right? But then for the action shots, the running shots, and so on, they used different kangaroos as well.
Really?
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. So look. I got deeper into the literature than you on this already. It's my level of granularity.
I think I'm going to be emotionally scarred after this, Gaz.
Now, they all had different functions. Some of these animals could stand up elegantly, and look left and right and do all these sort of things. Easy to handle. Others, there was one particular one called Nuts. He was a male. Skippy, of course, the female, so they had to shoot this Nuts from particular angles so we couldn't see his genitals. But what he was good at, he was very good at running behind a vehicle, so they could get these travelling shots of the room, going left to right, right to left, etc., etc. And it was very, very clever how they did that.
Skippy could understand everyone. It could open doors, carry things in her pouch.
She could play music. Remember that?
Music.
I remember that well.
She can operate the two-way radio.
Yes. Untie ropes. And tie them up and make knots for when they're rescuing people, right?
She foiled villains, and the greatest achievement of all. There are two, but you think Ringo's pretty cool? Skippy plays drums in the band.
That's right.
In one episode,
I certainly do remember.
Do you remember?
And look, the other thing that used to set my imagination wild was that Skippy could just hop off into this amazing bush and then come back, right?
Skippy wasn't a pet. It's important to know this. Skippy wasn't a pet.
No. It was free. It was free. Well,
enduring theme, freedom of the natural and freedom of the environment. Freedom of the young Sonny to be able to explore that great brown land.
And this is one of the quintessential features of Australia, right? It's openness. It's the new land like America was, but much more. Free than you could go out and this fauna could roam wild, and yet it would come back and help you.
And more than that, embodied in this episode, I think, of freedom is that Skippy somehow is able to go down to Randwick Racecourse and places a bet and wins on a horse. She placed a bet and won on a horse at Randwick Racecourse.
33's Wallaby built. 33's Wallaby built. Wallaby built, 33's. Odds on the board. 33's Wallaby built.
Now,
look, as I said, kangaroo genius.
And now some words from our 1964 sponsors.
The new Holden. Fashion-setting beauty to thrill the eye. New finer performance and surging power. There's a wonderful new look to Holden both inside and out, with sparkling new colors in either single or two-tone, each perfectly color-matched to the glamorous new interior styling. What a beauty she is. New breathtaking styling. Longer, lower, with sweeping new lines to safeguard your investment with a promise of high resale value for years to come. A new experience in safety and comfort. Wait till you try the new ball-type steering. So accurate, so...
And look, and in terms of historiography, one thing I'd like to point out as I think of it is that as I said before, it's become an Australian part of the Australian cosmology, part of the Australian myth, the kangaroo, right? And hasn't it come a long way? Because one of the first Europeans in recorded history, anyway, Europeans, white people, was Dirk Hartog, who remember Dirk Hartog, a Dutchman, sailing quite far south, and he bumps into the west coast of Australia. And he chances upon an island where, what does he see? These strange creatures, and he'd never seen anything like them before. They were hopping. They were large-ish, not huge, but they were hopping. And he thought, these Dutchmen thought they were rats, and they named the place Rotnest Island, which means the Rat Island. But little did they know that they'd come across wallabies, a close relative of kangaroos. And so here we have, hundreds of years later, this creature that was so maligned by being called a rat has become a national symbol and an internationally popular one to boot. So, look, there you go. History work, the historiography of the kangaroos is remarkable. From being a rat to being an international superstar of Australian symbol.
And an instrument of diplomacy.
Television producer John McCallum headed to the United States in 1967 to pitch Skippy to TV executives and secure funding to cover the costs of the series.
They stop in New York and they arrive at the Rockefeller Center, the NBC offices. This is where I think years later Seinfeld had to go and pitch the sitcom about nothing.
What does that mean? The show is about nothing.
What followed was like falling into the Hudson River. 3 executives of NBC sat through the films in stony silence. Then they told us that there was no hope whatsoever of selling them in America. They criticized everything. The stories, the acting, the accents. They said they couldn't understand a word anybody said. John McCallum, 1979.
They had a pretty tough time, but good old commercial interests came through. What was the breakthrough for Skippy to get to that worldwide fame? It was the breakfast cereal manufacturer Kellogg's.
Yes, of course.
It meant the program screened on more than 160 American television stations, in total 91 episodes over 3 series, as well as a feature film, The Intruders, from 1969.
This part of which is brought to you by all those good Kellogg's cereals.
Parallels, I've got to say here, Frank. Brian Epstein goes from Liverpool to London, trying to sell the Beatles story, turned down.
Did they see the potential? No. I'll bet you they were eating their
eating their cornflakes.
Eating their cornflakes in commiseration afterwards. Here's a mob in Australia using the techniques of American culture, the internationalising, the syndication, to actually grow this product, which, I mean, let's face it, is pretty boutique. It's pretty it's quite strange.
It's boutique, right? But it taps into basic human instincts of mateship and love and
freedom. All of those things we've talked about, and they were able to syndicalise it and spread it around the world. Right? I mean, that's a pretty remarkable thing.
Well, it's amazing. 128 countries, right? And its heyday was watched by a global audience of over 300 million viewers a week. Perhaps the biggest international success story of Australian TV. It was dubbed into 25 languages. According to Wikipedia, Skippy is still broadcast in Iran.
I thought Iran? This only underscores your point about the power and potential of soft diplomacy. If it can work in Iran, it can work anywhere.
If we can keep up relations with Iran through Skippy, it's our medium. And
absolutely, it's like the song. If I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. Right?
Now, if you know the Sweden story, right? They were one of the few countries in Europe that didn't take Skippy.
Oh, really?
Because they looked a little bit more, in their methodical way. They got advice from psychologists who deemed it damaging for children to grow up thinking that animals could understand humans and make decisions and.
Well, that's That shows sort of the Nordic logic, the Nordic underscoring of logic to the nth degree, right? To the
and
nth
their focus
degree.
on safety and standards, and I mean that's
look,
Volvo drivers,
I'd like to juxtapose that to the Southern European approach to skipping. Now, I'd like to do a bit of, I'd like someone to come back to us on this, but I suspect, right, that the reaction perhaps in, Italy or Greece was like, can we make prosciutto out of kangaroo?
Well,
right?
Think of satiric colony with 4 musicians going through it. Hello, Wagga Wagga.
I did but see her passing by, and yet I love her till I die.